What's up there guys, this is Rick. Thanks for tuning in. You're watching Fanfare for the Conscious, and in the video today we're going to be talking about intellectual tribalism and the lost art of debate. Let's dive in. This video has come up off the back of my general frustration which has been building over the last few years regarding trying to discuss contentious issues with anybody really, both in the mainstream community and in the alternative media, the alternative knowledge community. And I just wanted to take a little bit of time today to talk to you about the main factors that I think have been at play in this general loss of the ability to discuss contentious issues in a civilised and intellectually reasonable manner. So I'm going to quickly go through the factors on my whiteboard right here, and then after we've quickly gone through them all, I'm going to discuss them all in a little bit more detail and talk about how I think they all come together in order to form this intellectual tribalism that I've been talking about. The first thing on my list here is cognitive dissonance, and a lot of you have probably heard of this before. It is the egoic reaction to conflicting information. The next factor here is groupthink, which is the tendency for members of a group to minimize conflict and therefore maximize cohesion at all costs. Then we've got false dichotomy. This is the presentation of a binary choice where other options exist. And then there is the destruction of nuance, which is the belief that synonyms are fully interchangeable with each other and exact copies of each other. Then we've got opinionism, the belief that all opinions are equally valid, and the bastardization of personal truth. And then finally we've got tribalism itself, which is the assignment of tribal characteristics based on stated perspectives or opinions. So let's have a look and discuss some of these ideas in a little bit more detail. We'll start with cognitive dissonance, the egoic reaction to conflicting information. Now, what does that mean? Well, cognitive dissonance is an emotional reaction to conflicting information. So if someone presents you with an idea that disagrees with your fundamental beliefs and your fundamental understanding about how the world works, you feel an emotional reaction like anger, and what comes with that is the pressing need to reject the information that you've just received. The reason this happens is because people attach their opinions and their beliefs and their perspectives to their own ego, and they use them as defining characteristics of who they are. Now, what happens then when you present new information which conflicts with this is it feels like a personal attack on the other person, and that causes them to immediately reject the information without any critical thought, without any reason, without the application of intellect. Okay? That new information would mean that you would need to fundamentally reassess your beliefs and your understanding of the way the world works and the way certain factors fit together, and people don't like doing that because people like to think that they're right. So this cognitive dissonance is something that you'll actually heard bandied around a little bit in alternative media circles. And it's often used as a great big stick with which to beat your opponent. And that is the wrong way to use cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance should be recognised, and we should make best efforts to minimise the cognitive dissonance in the people with whom we are talking, and also make them aware of when they might be subjected to the cognitive dissonance. Now, it's important for everybody to be aware of this because it can very easily be misidentified as being intuition. Now, I rely a lot on intuition to figure out what information I think is pertinent and what information I think is not pertinent, and it's what I describe as a little red flag waving inside me that identifies that there's something not right about what I'm being told. And this isn't the same as cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is an emotional reaction, a purely emotional reaction, whereas I believe intuition is a combination of intellect and instinct, and you may not always be able to put into words exactly why something doesn't sit right with you. It doesn't feel right, but it's not the same as this immediate emotional reaction to reject new information. So important that we are able to identify what cognitive dissonance is and learn how to differentiate it from intuition and from instinct. The next thing we've got here is groupthink, and this is the tendency for members of a group to minimize conflict at all costs. Now, human beings like, this will tie actually a lot into tribalism, which we'll discuss at the end of the video. And human beings like to feel like they're part of a group. It's that tribal instinct that we have in us to join up with people with whom we share similar beliefs. And this can be very, very useful in terms of engaging in cooperation, but you need to be very, very careful to make sure you're not falling into the trap of simply believing what somebody else has said or absorbing the information that somebody said because they are part of the same group as you, whether that be in political spheres or whether that be in scientific understanding or whether that be in the pursuit of truth and the pursuit of knowledge. We need to be very, very aware that we're not falling into this trap of groupthink. You'll see this in the left-right paradigm, where people who identify themselves as being left-wing will automatically adopt anything said by someone else who they perceive to be left-wing as well, without critically analysing and actually thinking about the information that's being presented. This happens on the right wing as well. It happens in many, many different spheres of influence and spheres of discussion. And it's really, really important that we are aware of this and we are aware that we are not simply accepting somebody else's information because we perceive them to be part of the same group as we are. The next thing we've got is false dichotomy. And this is the presentation of a binary choice where other options exist. Now, false dichotomies are often used in order to limit the sphere of debate to two very distinct positions without considering that there may be other positions that you could adopt. This is a, Richard D. Hall calls it the phony bone of contention, which I quite like. However, I tend to use the term false dichotomy instead. You present two options as being the only options available and limit the sphere of debate to those two options and don't allow it to move outside of that. This is a method of reducing the reason capacity and the scope of discussion around a given subject in order to make sure that it is in either one of two camps. The beauty of only having two camps is that it's much easier for them to be manipulated and controlled via things like groupthink and cognitive dissonance. The next thing we're going to come on to here is the destruction of nuance. And that is the belief that synonyms are fully interchangeable. And this sort of starts to go into the importance of language and the importance of having a common understanding of the meaning of words. This is quite tricky in modern English because it is a poetic language in that there are often multiple different meanings to a given word, and it's reliant on the person receiving and hearing those words for one, understanding the context in which those words are being presented, for two, having a fully having a full awareness of exactly what the potential meanings of that word are, and three, understanding and recognizing the position that the other person holds. That gives you more clues as to what exactly that person means when they use a given word. The destruction of nuance is also the loss of subtlety in different words. So a lot of people will take anger and frustration and imagine that they are the same thing, when in fact they are subtly different. There is something about frustration which makes it different to anger, or exasperation is another great term that is kind of like frustration but without the anger. And this fluffiness of language makes it kind of difficult, but we've also got to be very, very aware that there is a reason that there are multiple different words which have similar meanings, because there is this subtlety of understanding and this nuance to the language that we use. So it's important to be very, very aware of the fact that synonyms are not exact copies of each other. Now this ties in quite interestingly with the concept of newspeak, which was presented in 1984 by George Orwell. Now, it's very, very interesting book. If you've not read it, I suggest that you go out and read it. Or if you don't have the time to actually read it, you can find online free audiobook narrations of 1984. So if you've not read it or listened to it, please go out and do that. I'll give you a lot more insight into why this destruction of nuance is an important thing to be aware of. The less words you have to describe a general feeling, the more you lose subtlety and the more you start to lose the details of exactly what the person is trying to express. You could boil language down to very, very simple concepts, but that then necessarily reduces the detail and the complexity and the nuance of what people are saying. Next thing we're going to come on to here is opinionism. And this is the belief that all opinions are equally valid, and it's the bastardization of personal truth. Now, I do accept that there is a difference between the things that are personally true from a given perspective and the things which are ultimately true from a holistic perspective. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, if you stand in a given position, in an intellectual position, and you accept certain precepts and certain concepts as being fundamental to that perspective, then from that perspective, something can be said to be true. However, that is important that we embrace the caveat there of from a given perspective, with these things being accepted, all things being equal is the quite useful phrase. But that doesn't make them objectively true. If you were to stand at one end of a cylinder, exactly at the circular end, and look down the length of that cylinder, unable to see anything beyond the initial surface area, then from that perspective, that cylinder would appear to be a circle. If you were to then move 90 degrees around that cylinder and view it from a different perspective, you would see that cylinder then as a rectangle or a square. Now, both of those positions from those perspectives are true. If you stand in that place, it is a circle as far as you're aware. If you stand in the other place, it is a square as far as you're aware. Now, the ultimate truth is that it is a cylinder. And the only way you can come to the knowledge that it is a cylinder is by adopting multiple different perspectives in order to see the whole from as many different angles as possible. Now, this is the actual essence of debate, and the best people at debating are able to adopt positions that they do not traditionally hold. This is a very, very useful skill because it allows you to step outside your own personal perspective and start to look at the world from the position of different people, different caveats, different base knowledge. And by adopting those different base knowledge banks, you can then come to a more holistic understanding of exactly what is going on. Opinionism is also tied in to the idea that all opinions are equally valid. And unfortunately, they're not. As much as many people would like to think that, you know, they can say whatever they want and just hang the word opinion on it, and that means that nobody can attack them because that's my opinion and I'm allowed to have that opinion. Well, yes, you are allowed to have that opinion, and I'm allowed to tell you that that opinion is objectively wrong. And I'm allowed to do that because I can turn around and say, but I think the sky's green, that's my personal opinion. And you could turn around and say, but it's not, it's blue, look up. And I can say, no, I'm not going to look up because I don't want to change my opinion. My opinion is valid because I'm allowed to hold that opinion that the sky is green. Now, the issue there is that there is objective evidence that your opinion is not correct, or at least not wholly correct. if you adopt this idea that all opinions are equally valid, then you are reducing your own ability to acquire knowledge and to acquire true truth knowledge. All you need to do is look up, and then you will see that the sky is not green and that your opinion is not valid. However, if you refuse to look up, you can cling to that little opinion all you like, because you are refusing to look at the evidence which may contradict that. And that might come down to cognitive dissonance, it might come down to groupthink, it might come down to false dichotomy or the destruction of nuance, or any of the other concepts that we've talked about up until now. However, this opinionism is quite dangerous because it allows people to present information that is objectively not true as if it was valid. The final thing we're going to come on to today is tribalism, and this is the assignment of tribal characteristics based on stated perspectives or opinions, and this ties back into false dichotomy and groupthink and cognitive dissonance and opinionism and the destruction of nuance. It brings it all together into one idea. Now, the human brain likes to take shortcuts. It likes to make assumptions, and it likes to use previous information to fill in the gaps. This can necessarily lead to a warped perspective of the way things work, because you're not trying to acquire all the little nuanced pieces of information about a person's perspective. What you're doing is you're hearing one idea and you're saying, that person is left-wing, that person is right-wing, that person is anti-establishment, that person is this, that person is that, and you're taking that single opinion and applying a label to it. Now, what that label does then is it allows you to apply a whole bunch of other opinions of that person or that perspective which have not actually necessarily been stated. Now, I've encountered this a lot over the last few weeks. In fact, yesterday I was accused of both being alt-right and of being a lefty, simply based on two separate statements which I made that then people applied to this tribe of left-wing or right-wing and then assigned a whole bunch of other beliefs to me, which are patently not true. I do not subscribe to any group besides truth. That is my only aim here, is to discover truth. And I actually like being wrong. And we've got to avoid this tribalistic tendency to say, oh, that person's part of this tribe, that person's part of this tribe. What it does is it eliminates the nuance of a person's idea, and it eliminates their individuality. Now, individuality is very, very important in order to give people as broad a perspective as possible, and you need to be able to recognize someone as being an individual. Sure, they may hold a bunch of ideas that are left-wing, but you don't know unless you've spoke to them and you've taken the time to really understand who they are and where they're coming from, that they might also hold some opinions that would be considered to be right-wing. So how does this all come together to bring this intellectual tribalism? Okay? Well, when people are presented with opinions that they don't like, that don't fit with their worldview, cognitive dissonance kicks in straight away and you get the reject. They assign themselves to a tribe and they assign you to a tribe. So if I say that I don't think that the WHO or the CDC can be trusted because they are corporate entities masquerading as independent think tanks or groups or whatever you want to consider them to be, someone might immediately say, oh, well, you're alt-right. Well, then on the opposite side, I can say, well, I don't trust the right and I don't trust the alt media, which is very obviously being controlled by entities at this point. In the broad sense, you've got a few individuals out here who don't assign themselves to groups. Looking at you, Neil Sanders, love your individuality, keep it going, don't let anybody put you in a tribe. I won't join a tribe because it's not useful. You get false dichotomies put in where they say it's left or right, and you're either adopting that opinion or you're adopting that opinion, and again, that applies this tribalism, opinionism, and the destruction of nuance. All this comes together to make a truly intellectual debate very, very difficult. People will assume things of each other, people will not take the time to actually ask questions and fully understand another person's perspective, and that requires this challenging of precepts and challenging of existing ideas, producing cognitive dissonance. And it's really difficult to exactly describe how this all kind of plays together, but hopefully you guys can have a look at these, apply your own intellect, apply your own reason and logic, and start to understand how all these factors have come together to destroy civilized debate. I hope you've enjoyed this content. If you're still watching, thank you very much. Don't forget to hit the subscribe and the like button. Don't forget that notification bell. It'll make sure you're always kept up to date with all my latest content. If you're in America and you want to be part of the lawful living movement, please go and head yourself over to the AmericanStatesAssembly.net and record yourself as a lawful living being. Save your property, take control of your country, and take control of your own self-governance. If you want to find out more about the birth certificate fraud and in general all the lies and deceit that have been played upon us for the last 100, maybe even thousands of years, go and check AnnaVonRights.com. She has thousands of PDFs detailing exactly how this has all worked. If you want to talk with me, don't forget to sign up at lawfulbank.com. Go and add me as a friend, send me a message. Hey, you can even give me a phone call if you really want to. I would love to speak to any of you who are willing to actually stand up and do something about the wrongs of the world. That just leaves me to say thank you very much. Take care of yourselves, guys. Stay free, think free, act free, and I'll see you next time.